Okay, Boker Tov, everybody who is here and everybody who is online. We learn as always, Lili Nishmat Avigdor Chai Avram Ben Mertzir Rachalea Lili Nishama. I want to start this morning as I did last night in the Tanya class with a very brief commercial. For those of you who remember Johnny Carson, when Ed McMahon would say, I hold in my hand the last envelope, well, I hold in my hand the first book. I should put it on the screen. Thank you. Tonight, Bezrat Hashem will be the book launch for the 3 images. In addition to that, will be for the second volume of the Piyutim. Hope to see whoever can be there. Bezrat Hashem, 7:30 tonight. We start with Kibud Kal. Come for the Kibud Kal. Stay for the, what's that? It's at Annette Fox Uri Kalfa's Gina. Correct. 112/2. Be there. Aloha. Okay, so much for the commercial. We move on with life. We are about to start, as I gave a little bit of introduction last week. We're on page 84 in the small version of the book. But in either case, we're on the beginning of Perek Yud Gimel, chapter 13. Also, it'll be noted, for those of you who are not here, available to everybody who wishes to get this. There we go. Tfilat Hodaya Le'Borei Olam, that the Lifshitz family has sponsored, printing 1 or 2, 3, whatever thousand. I held it up to the screen. For those of you who are interested, please contact myself, contact the Lifshitz family. It is a beautiful tefillah of thank you to Hashem, and in memory also of Avigdor Chai Avram Ben Mertzir Rachalea. Okay. I gave a little introduction last week to this next chapter, this next section. Yes, question. It's okay. Okay, it's fine. Page 84 or chapter 13. Okay, B'simcha. This next section, I need to give you a little overview of this chapter before we do it, because if I don't, you'll leave here either frustrated, upset, mad, or confused. It's almost like you're going to leave with my saying, and the one who actually committed the murder was, see you next week. Okay, so I can't do that to you. So let me explain to you what this chapter is about. Until now, we've talked about people who want to, the way he's going to phrase it, who want to rise to the level of being a tzaddik. Now, we have to understand something. We know that the Rambam, the Balatanya, Mesilat Yesharim, you name it, all have a different approach of what exactly is the tzaddik. So right now we're just going to use the terminology in a very loose way. A person who wants to be more pious in their life, to really get closer to Hashem. So he says, until now, we're dealing with a person who wants to elevate themselves to a level of a tzaddik. And no one should ever say, I can't be a tzaddik. Of course not. We all can reach a certain level. And by the way, where you are today, maybe relative to where you were 20 years ago, you're already a tzaddik or a tzaddikah. Maybe. I don't know. That's up to God. And from here on out, we're going to go up to a different level called chassid. And it's really important to understand that when we talk about a chassid, we're not talking about a guy who's got a black hat, payas, and a long black coat. That is not what makes a person a chassid. What's that? Or a misnagid, right. Clothing does not make the person. In spite of what Shakespeare said, where clothing oft proclaims the man, Polonius to Laertes. See, I remembered. And he's going to start out by saying, basically, look, there are plenty of things that you can't do already, but we're going to say, if you want to reach this next level, even those things that are permitted to you, you should stay away from. Wait, what? What's wrong with? I can eat, I can sleep, I can read. No, you want to be one of those prushim. You want to be someone who separates himself from even masha mutar lacha. It's good for you. Then he brings other commentaries and said, we have enough stuff that we can't do already. Why do we have to pile on more things that make life more difficult, more things that we shouldn't be able to do? So he basically presents us, and the reason I'm saying this whole thing out loud first is that when we do it at the rate we go, we're not going to get to the resolution, maybe not even to the contradiction. But the contradiction basically seems to be between the two different approaches, that there are many sources that seem to support the idea of person should strive for prishut. How does he translate prishut? Wait, let me guess. Asceticism? Abstinence. Okay. Of abstinence. I don't like the word though for this situation. Separation. Separation. Okay, so that's more of a makes more sense in the terminology he's going to use, especially when we're going to talk about concept of kedusha and kedoshim tiyu, prushim tiyu. I don't want to get ahead of myself too much. So that a person who wants to reach this level, there's plenty of source material that seems to say, go for it. And plenty of other source material seems to say, don't do that. So which is it? So he's going to come out at the end of this chapter with saying there is prishut tova and prishut ra'a. There's a good approach to it and a negative approach. So if you remember way back when, I remember when we started exactly, it's obviously it's a little less than a year, maybe 11 months ago. When we started at the beginning of the book, his commentary at the beginning of the book, or his introduction, he said, many people think that to become a better person, you have to go through all kinds of fasts and go into cold, freezing cold mikvah. And he says, and that's just shtuyot. And yet in this chapter, he seems to support the idea of doing some of that. So which is it? So at least now you know, when it comes up in your head and say like, what? How can that even be? He will address it. I'm not going to give you all the details because then might as well skip the chapter. Okay, here we go. Beginning of Parak Yud Gimel. If whatever it took us like 3 months to do chapter Yud Aleph, it will take us a lot less per chapter coming up now. Not that we're in a race. So Yud Gimel, B'veihu midata prishut. The explanation of the midah, the character trait of prishut. I'm not going to, just like I didn't really translate nikiyut and others and srizut, it's going to call it prishut. Ha-prishut hi tchilat ha-chasidut. The first step towards saintliness, towards, let me also back up and give you one more point. I don't remember if I mentioned this or not last week. What we will deal with from now until the end of the book, in many cases, will seem like way out of reach of the average person. And the truth is that it is. But that does not mean that you don't read it, because whereas you may not be able to do 100% of what you're about to read, even if you do 2%, 3%, it's still 2% or 3% more than you were aware of before you did this section of the book. He will even say this is for yichidim, this is for individuals. It's not meant as a broad across the spectrum that everyone needs to have to do this. Judy. Yeah, I know it's a poor translation. Chassidut does not necessarily mean saintliness. We usually use it as piety, right? Piety. I don't mind on the road piety, but to sainthood. Sainthood and saintliness are different, but it is used in English even in the, yeah, it's like when people talk about, there's certain words like revelation, like it was the God's, you talk about hitgalut Hashem, the revelation of God, just it has this connotation in my head also. I know. Okay, but okay. So I'm not really going to translate some of these terms anyways. So the first step in Chassidut is prishut. And see that everything I've explained until now, all these 12 chapters till now, is what I need, what it really is a person is required to do in order to become a tzaddik. Now again, I told you time and time again, it's really important. Nobody is going to tell you you have to do every single thing in this book before you move on to the next step. It is not likely, because you'll be stuck in the introduction the rest of your life. Not even chapter 1, just the introduction. So you have to take it with a sense of an approach that I'm going to do whatever I can within this book. So the first part he says in the book until now, to become a tzaddik. From here on out, you want to be a chassid. He says now he's going to make an interesting comparison. When you take prishut and chasidut, they mirror the ideas in the first 2 chapters of the book, or 2 sections, which are prishut is veering away from things you shouldn't do, and chasidut is with the positives. Just like we saw, zehirut, staying away from things, is the sur meira. Zizut is aseh tov, because it's not enough to do one or the other. It's nice to do the aseh tov, but not if you don't do the aseh ra. It's not enough if you just stay away from evil and bad, but you also have to do good. So too, the prishut and chasidut go hand in hand. One, the prishut is the staying away from certain things, and the chasidut is proactively doing other things. The general rule of prishut is, mashamru zichronam livracha, Where they say in Gemara Yevamot, some of you do Daf Yomi, came across this a little while ago. I don't know what Daf you're on today. But 94. So you did this 70, about 2.5 months ago. Kadesh Atzmacha, isn't it sad? Not sad. You get to page to Daf 94 to know you still have so much more to go. I know you're more than halfway through. Yeah, Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. It's nice in Yerushalmi, it's so much shorter. It's still long, it's like 60 or something, but anyways, I digress. So the general rule is what they say in Gemara Yevamot, Kadesh Atzmacha b'mutar lach. You can elevate yourself to a level of Kedusha. You can sanctify yourself, even with what is permissible to you. Now, those of you who are in the Tanya class with me, we exactly talked about this last night. A little bit different approach he's going to take today. But the general idea, even before you go further, is that when you take something that is permissible, I have a glass of water. I can drink water all day long if I want. I can eat. I can sleep. But when you do it, l'shem shamayim, you do it for the proper reason, to serve Hashem, to be healthy, then you've raised that item to a level of Kedusha. You've raised your own level of Kedusha. But he's going to go even further than that. This is what the meaning of the word is itself. Pirishut. What does that mean? He needs to be separated and to separate itself and distance himself from an object, an item, a thing. He prohibits himself something which is permitted. And the intention, the meaning is, he will not only not have the isur, but he will also not have any connection or contact whatsoever, come nowhere close to it. Anything that potentially could lead to something bad, even though right now it doesn't cause any bad, and even more so when it itself intrinsically is not evil, he will distance himself and stay away from it. Now, this is, for I would guess 98% of the people, very, very difficult pill to swallow, because that he's going to, again, I mentioned this before, this is going to give you like going to make you a little bit, what's that? Give you the heebie-jeebies, and he will discuss it in two paragraphs from now. But right now, he's basically saying that even though there are things that are permitted, if you want to even elevate yourself, it does not mean, it's clear, it doesn't mean don't eat, it doesn't mean don't sleep, it doesn't mean don't drink, don't, what's that? Being a Nazir is another completely different topic section, but it's another way to elevate yourself. And by the way, if you today take on a vow of Nazirut, it's forever until Beit HaMikdash comes. Because the only way you finish your Nazirut is by bringing a korban, and you can't bring the korbanot. So be careful what you wish for. Yeah. Yes, Judy.
I have the feeling that the Catholic priesthood is just jumping with joy to read something.
Okay, so Judy's saying she has a feeling the Catholic priesthood is jumping with joy to read something like this.
Because it seems to say, this is a good idea. We will not have women in our lives because they may lead to.
Right. Okay, so Judy's saying that they say that, look, we won't have women in our lives because they may lead us astray. You'll notice that nowhere in the Torah, nowhere in Halacha does it ever say don't get married and don't have sex. It doesn't say that anywhere. Right. Okay. So obviously this is not what that means. Right. Celebrate and celebrate. Right. Exactly. Very good. And eating. Okay. We're going to come to all this. I understand what you're saying. That's why I anticipated we're all going to feel a little uncomfortable with this topic until he starts to clarify. And you won't have that clarification really strongly enough till next week. Okay. That's why I didn't want to kind of give you a little bit of background here. It does not mean, again, don't eat, don't sleep, don't drink, don't be married. Does not mean that at all. Parenthetically, I'll tell you something interesting that doesn't directly tie to this, but somewhat does. If a person wants to fast, I think he might mention this in here, but I don't remember offhand. If a person wants to fast because they want to do something a little bit of, whether it's for tshuva or to get a little closer to Hashem, and they don't have the wherewithal, the physical ability to fast a regular fast, even a half a day fast. I don't know if you're aware, but there is a concept that if you're eating a meal and you're near the end, and you still a little bit hungry, and you don't eat that last little bit because you can consider that fasting also. Now, what about wasting food and bal tashchit? What about that? Well, someone can eat it, they can eat it. And if not, it's not bal tashchit. You've used that food. How did you use it? You didn't use it necessarily for eating, but you did use it for a purpose. Now, the wind blew my pages. Let's just see if I can get back to where we were. Okay, we'll start from the beginning of the book again. Okay, hold on. Let me find it. Here it is. Okay. V'itbonen v'tir'eh sheyesh kan shlosh madregot. He says, we think about it, there are really three general categories we could talk about. Yesh ha'isurim atzmam, there are things that are prohibited. You can't eat treif. You can't drive on Shabbat. You can't, whatever. Yesh siagotehem, and there are those things that are like the protectors, so to speak. For example, muktzah, right? Muktzah is a protection. Torah doesn't care if I walk around all day long with a pencil in my hand. Doesn't make any difference to Hashem, so to speak, in quotes. Torah doesn't prohibit it. Chachamim said, we're going to protect you from you, and therefore we're going to make sure that you don't use the pencil. We come up with the idea of muktzah. That's a siyag. Those are the protective measures that the Chachamim have instituted al kol Yisrael. Notice what he says. We all have to do those. Someone can't say, well, muktzah doesn't really speak to me. I'm careful. I'll carry my pencil around, or my phone, so right at the end of Shabbat, I'll be able to use it. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to use it. You can't do that. You can't just say, I'm not going to accept that. But there are additional harchakot. There's another halacha that has this, we'll talk about in a minute. The harchakot, things that will distance you from something that anyone who wants to be a parush would do. Liot kones betoch shelo, he'll even more come into his own daled amot, so to speak. Uboneh gedarim latzmo, and he'll build these walls around himself or fences. Dahainu la'aniach min haterim atzmam shelo nesu l'chol Yisrael. V'lifrosh mehem, to take those things that everyone is allowed to do, and still he'll distance himself from them. So he'll even be further away from that. Okay. First, let me tell you a couple things that pop into my head just now, and I hope will help this a little bit. I have, thank God, never been afflicted with alcoholism. We all have our, so to speak, crosses to bear. You already mentioned the Catholic Church, so I might as well mention that expression. We all have our things in life that we have to deal with. Everyone has their challenges. That's not, thank God, one of mine. And therefore, if I were to go to a party, and I don't particularly care for schnapps much. I mean, it doesn't disgust me, but it's not something I run after. So if someone was to ask me at a party, would you do me a favor, take this bottle of Glenlivet, just pour for some people? Fine, no problem. Or if I'm at a simcha, I said, come on, just a half a shot, something, okay, fine. Oh, boom, I have it. Okay. Work at a bar, big deal. Work at Piap, however how you pronounce the name of the store, Piap. Okay. Work at a store that sells alcoholic items. No problem. What about a person who's a recovering alcoholic? You can't do any of those. Can't work at Piap, can't work at a bar, can't pour drinks for people, can't just hold a shot glass. Why? There's nothing wrong with it. It's 100% permissible to hold it. But that person is trying to protect himself from himself. Okay? And you're going to say there's no comparison whatsoever, correct?
No, but I'm eager to hear the second.
The second half of that comparison, you mean? Okay. Let's talk about food. If a person is trying to lose weight, if a person is trying to diet, to watch what they're eating, not even, or be healthier, correct, or healthy, or healthier, yes. They also will take certain measures. They won't buy certain things and bring it to their home because they know themselves. A person who's a parush, in a sense, of saying, look, I know myself. I am not necessarily the strongest person in the world to resist whatever temptation might be. Therefore, I'm going to protect myself from myself and add on another layer of protection around me. And by the way, I have no problem, and this is a general commentary about Judaism, I guess. I have no problem with someone saying that they want to wear black clothes and white shirts and not have a mixing of men and women in any possible way, and have all kinds of gedarim and all kinds of fences around themselves, as long as they don't say I'm treif because I don't. I'm okay with that. You want to live your life. You want to protect yourself from yourself, however you see. Now, when you take it to the absolute extreme and you make it and become a cult like Lev Tahor and other things, which is very not Tahor, that's a very big problem. But I'm not talking about extremes. Person has a right to choose themselves. There are people who think that all of you sitting here, all of you on Zoom, and myself, we're extremists. Remember, we are all obstacles to peace. We are the reason that there's no peace in the Middle East or possibly the entire world. We're extremists, right? Or even forget a little bit of tongue in cheek. Just take a person who grows up non-religious and sometimes anti-religious. The fact that I have this on my head already means I'm religious. Therefore, I stand for something, and you stand for something, and that's an extremist. Oh my God, Saturday, Shabbat, Shabbos. That's my day to go on the buses. Oh man, you religious fanatics. See, when you hear it from that perspective, you start to think like, okay, I can understand. Like, well, to us, it sounds like, what do you mean you're going to only have X amount of food? Or you're going to allow this mixture of this? Okay, everyone has their areas of what they need to do for themselves. Now, yes, there's a difference between halacha and approach to life. Okay, I understand that. But this is just a little bit of background here. Now, we have other areas, one other area of halacha where we have harchakot as well. Hilchot nida. When a woman is a nida, we know that it's not just that they're not allowed to have relations, not allowed just to touch each other. There are other things that can't be done between husband and wife. We know that. They can't pass things to each other. They can't move a piece of furniture together, just as examples. Lots of things that for some reason, I've taught 4 chatanim in the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks. Just all of a sudden, some I go 2 years, I don't teach one. It's a bunch at one time. And I always say, first of all, imagine you're learning Hilchot Shabbat for the first time, because most come with very little knowledge, which is good. And imagine you learn it one time for a few classes and never learned it again. It's a recipe for disaster. No, you got to review, because what if you learned something wrong or misunderstood something? And I always give them this little background to before we get to the harchakot. Said, look, this is the way it is, the halacha is, and here's what you have to deal with. And everyone has to work within the confines of what they feel they can able to do within the area of halacha. And again, this is not a recipe of me telling you, nor him telling you, you need to do this. We're going to see. Now, take a look at the next paragraph. Here's we're going to kind of put the other side of the coin. V'im tomara, maybe you might say, where in the world do we know to start adding more prohibitions, more isurim on top of what we already have? They said in Yerushalmi, lo dayecha ma she'asra Torah. It's Yerushalmi, yeah, no. By the way, did I mention that was in Yerushalmi? Anyways, lo dayecha ma she'asra Torah. It's not enough what the Torah already prohibited to you. And you want to come along and prohibit more stuff. Well, doesn't sound too positive for the Prushim right now. That which the Chachamim saw in their wisdom, that it should be prohibited, and they put up a protective measure. They did it already. And that which they left just permissible to do, because they saw that's okay to keep mutar, and there's no reason to add a prohibition. Why do you have to add new decrees? The Chachamim did it. No, I was just saying. Is again a Catholic reference. Like, what do you mean more Catholic than the Pope, right? If Abaye and Rava and Rav and Shmuel and Hillel Zaken and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, they didn't do X, you're going to come along and add more stuff, more than they did. What, you're frummer than them? And that's basically what they're saying here. Vote, and furthermore, this next point is even stronger. There's then, if you start to do that, then there's no boundaries whatsoever here. They say in Hebrew, en davar sof. V'nimsa, turns out, im kein adam shomem u'me'uneh v'lo neheneh min olam klal. A person would sit alone in poverty, I don't know what the words I'm looking for here, desolate, and not have any benefit whatsoever from this world. And he, by the way, remember, he said in the beginning of the book, that's not what this is about, sitting on a mountaintop by yourself with nothing around. The Chazals told us again in Yerushalmi, we are going to have to give an accounting to Hashem after 120 years. That everything we saw, and we didn't want to eat from it, even though that was permissible and you could have eaten it, or the mountains you could have visited, or the places you could have gone. Okay, first I'm going to digress to that in a minute, but first let me finish the sentence. All the places you will go. They based this on the pasuk in Kohelet. And Shlomo Melech says, anything my eye saw, I didn't prevent myself from them. Wait, 1 second. First of all, let's understand what this last piece means. If I'm not mistaken, Rav Kook, now if it wasn't him, I'm sorry, but it was some gadol, said that he went to Switzerland. He was in World War I. He was in I think it was Switzerland. He was stuck there for a couple of years. And one of the reasons he went originally, I don't remember the exact, but something to the effect of that he didn't want to, after 120 years go before Hashem and not say, what magnificent Swiss Alps you made. Notice Hashem, the way I heard the story originally told was, Hashem's going to say, my Swiss Alps, did you see them? Did you see what I did? Right? Now, does that mean, oh wait, isn't there a prohibition about leaving Israel? Like some say, once you come to Israel, you can never leave. Okay, so again, balance, we'll talk about the different time, not today. But the point being is that, notice what he says. He says that it says in here that a person is going to give din v'cheshbon on what he saw that he could eat and was mutar to him to eat, and he was able to. Meaning, if, let's say, for example, I happen to like hamburgers, I barely ever have them, but let's say I have one. Assume for a moment it's not healthy for me. It is, but let's assume for a moment it isn't. So if it's not healthy for me, Hashem can't say to me, so to speak, hey, Zev, the heck, passed by burgers bar 416 times. Not once did you eat one of my hamburgers, right? Oh God, had you told me you were the one flipping the burgers, I might have had one, right? At least I was being a good, no. So what does it mean? It means he could have, either physically he could, or health-wise he could have. But what you have here now is an absolute contradiction in sources. On the one hand, we see, Prushim to you, Kedoshim to you, Mina Mutalach, you should separate yourself. On the other hand, we have enough things that prohibit us already from doing things. Don't add stuff onto it. The Gemara actually says, a few places, including in Masechet Shabbat, at least a couple of places I can remember, it says that one of the Chachamim wanted to say something's prohibited. And what the prohibition was a prohibition on something that was already the Chachamim instituted. So they say the following, more or less. X is Exeah. What you want, the original issue is Exeah or decree from the Chachamim. And we're going to make a decree on top of a decree. Chachamim don't do that. That's not their job. That's not what they do. They don't say that this is prohibited. Oh, let's build another issue. In other words, now that we have Muktzah, which is the Rabbanan, now that we already have that, let's make another issue. That even on Wednesday, when the days start to be connected to Shabbat, that until Tuesday is connected to the prior Shabbat, Wednesday to the next Shabbat, starting on Wednesday, you should at least put your muktzah things on a separate place, because maybe Friday you're going to forget to put it. We don't do stuff like that. It's shtuyot, says the Gemara, almost those words. So how is it that on one hand you have this, and on one hand you have that? Which is it? Now he's going to sort of start to answer it, but until he really gets to the answer, it's going to be another number of paragraphs. So let's get where it says Hatshuvahi. The answer is, even though, like I say, this isn't really the answer coming up, it's the introduction, the beginning towards the answer. It's getting us there. Hatshuvahi ki aprishut vadai tzarich umuchrach. Says, first of all, let me start off by saying, yes, prishut is a good thing. It's necessary. And the Chachamim have already warned us about this, and told us about it. It says in the beginning of Parashat Kedoshim, Kedoshim to you, ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokechem. You shall be holy. And Rashi tells us, Gemara tells us, other places, Pirushim to you. Open up when you're finished here. You have nothing else to do with your life. Go home. Open up your home already. When you go take out your Chumash, open up the Parashat Kedoshim. popular, well-known Rashi, Kedoshin to you means Pushin to you. Means you should separate yourself. Again, let's also make sure it's very clear about something. A person does not become kadosh with no action. I cannot wake up one morning and say, I'm holy, I'm kadosh, don't touch me, I'm holy. There are plenty of people who say, I'm holier than thou. Either by word or deed, they say that. It's a tough one. But there is some recipe. There's a recipe for Kedusha. And that is Prushim. But what does it mean? We just said, wait a minute. You can't answer me with the same stuff you just told me. You just told me Prishut is, I don't have a clear direction here. It is good, it's not good. And you just now told me, no, I have to do it. Let's see. Furthermore, they said, Kol hayoshev v'ta'anit, whoever sits and fasts, nikah kadosh, kal v'chomer me, nazir. That a person who sits and fasts a lot is considered holy, and that's a kal v'chomer a fortiori, which is a Latin phrase for meaning even more so. We learned that from the case of a situation of a nazir. Furthermore, they said, see, what he's doing here is maddening, because he said, okay, Prushim, good thing. Prushim, not a good thing. Wait, now we have a contradiction. Oh, here's the answer. Prushim, good thing. Prushim, good. Wait, you're not answering. Again, I say that because your brains are working right now how they should, I hope. Well, and it still should be boggling your mind. Like, I don't understand. Just, so you got to be patient here. Not everything gets answered in a millisecond. Furthermore, it says, Tzadik ocheles sova l'nafsho. Zeh Chizkiyahu melech Yehuda. This refers to Chizkiyahu, king of Yehuda. Amru alav, he said, they say about him, Sheshtei agudot sheyarak li'tzashal basar ayu ma'alin lefanav b'chol yom, ayu Yisrael mal'igim ve'omrim zeh melech. In other words, he didn't have brought much to the table. They say, this is a king. Furthermore, they say about Rabbeinu HaKadosh, who's Rebbe. I'm going to kind of run through this so I can explain. They said about Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Shebeshat mitato, that as he was dying, Zakaf eser etzbaot v'amar, he went like this. He put his 10 fingers up in the air and said, Galui v'yadua lefanecha. Now, Rebbe was extremely wealthy. He says, I say before you, God, it's known to you. Shelo neheneti min haolam hazeh, I didn't have any benefit in this world. Afilu etzba ktana sheli, even my pinky. Odamru, furthermore, they said, Ad shadam mitpalela divrei Torah shikansu b'toch meyav. Before a person davens that the words of Torah should enter him, yitpalel, he should rather pray ala achila u'shtiyah, on food and drink, shelo yikansu b'toch meyav, that food shouldn't enter his body, which also doesn't make sense in the just the translation. Hold on with that. All these things I just told you, you see, it shows that it is a good thing to do prishut. Omnam, but bottom line, I still need to explain, how is it possible with all these on the one side? And if you're an accountant, right, you got your debits and your credits, which just means the left side and the right side. That was drilled into me by Mr. Sandhelm. That on the one side, you have all these things that's a good thing, it's a positive thing to be prushim, and the other side, you have the negatives. And now he says, in spite of all that I just now told you, we still have to figure out what's going on here. Why the seeming contradiction in terms or ideas? Now, what do you think it means that a person should daven? I didn't even look at this inside because to me it's just intuitive. That a person should daven that the food and drink should not enter his body, into his kishkas. Okay, so I have a couple of thoughts of what that means. First of all, you cannot daven for something like that for real, because you're basically saying, I hope I starve to death. Because without food and drink, you die. Not you, a person dies. Therefore, that's not what it means. Now, it could mean a couple of things. That my body should only absorb that which it essentially needs, maybe. It could also be that if, God forbid, I should happen to eat something not kosher, it should not enter, it should not somehow be absorbed into my body. Okay. Now, for those of you who learn Tanya, those of you who learn, we saw Mesilat Yesharim already, that with the negative effect that non-kosher food does to your body, not to your physical body, but to your neshama. We've discussed that, how it becomes a part of you physically in your body and then part of you spiritually. So I think that that's maybe what this refers to. But it's also meant, I assume metaphorically, that yes, of course I have to, but let it be the bare minimum that I eat to get by. Okay, so again, on the one hand, you have all these psukim or connotations of it's a good thing, and then you have the opposite. He says again, reading that last line, we have to understand and reconcile the statements that are exactly the opposite. Okay, the next very brief, again, my printing is a very brief paragraph. It's like 2 sentences, is going to give the koteret, or the headline, as it were, for the answer. I'm going to read it, mention a little bit, and we're going to stop. But the matter is as follows. There are obviously some very specific distinctions and fundamental ideas in this matter. If I were to ask you, is fire good? The answer is yes. If I were to ask you, is fire bad? The answer is yes. Well, which is it? The answer depends. Am I using it to cook, or am I using it to burn someone's house down? God forbid, right? So it goes both ways. And we're going to see in a sense that there's a similar approach here. There is a form of prishut that we are in fact commanded to try to strive for. And there's another kind of prishut that we're warned to not get tripped up by and get sucked in by. I love that line. Don't try to be such a big tzaddik. Okay, it doesn't mean what it sounds like. It doesn't mean, of course, you want to try and be the best tzaddik you can and tzaddikah you can, right? What does it mean? There are approaches to someone who wants to be this tzaddik. There are foolish approaches. I'm going to be the best tzaddik I ever could be and just do whatever it is. I'm going to sit on top of one of these mountains down there in Midbar Yehuda, which I do want to do one day, but just for like a day, not for months. Especially it has to have plita, refrigerator, and bathroom, but okay. So I'm not that big of an ascetic. Oh, and air conditioning. Good Wi-Fi. I don't think the list is over yet, but I'm going to be all by myself. Anyways, so it doesn't mean I'm going to sit on that mountaintop and I'm going to be this tzaddik and no one's even going to know to come up to me and I'm going to grow in spirituality. Yes, there's this idea of hitbodedut, of communing with Hashem and being alone with God, but it's for an hour, it's for half an hour, it's for 5 minutes, whatever a person can do. It doesn't mean cutting yourself off from society. Al tifrosh minat tzibur. You don't separate yourself from the tzibur. Look at the word. This is the word just popped into my head now. Al tifrosh minat tzibur. Don't separate yourself from the community. You need to be part. So being a prushim does not mean excising yourself from the entire community. It may mean excising yourself from certain types of people in a community, right? If you're surrounded by people who speak Lashon Hara, who don't eat the proper foods, who don't keep Shabbat properly, whatever it might be, unless your goal and potential ability is to turn them around and you're in Kiruv, you may separate yourself because that's being a Parush also, that's Prushim. So he says basically there are 2 approaches, and the rest of this chapter, which is a couple pages, I think, is going to deal with prishut that's good and prishut that's, he calls ra, evil. Not that's not good, he says it's evil. Because in a sense, what it's going to do is it causes more damage than helping. We all are familiar with people who have gone off the deep end. Right? They're called, what is this expression? Not frummed out. They're called something out. What's it called? They made a song for Blue Fringe even.
Flipped out.
Oh, thank you. Flipped out. Okay, we all know people who flipped out. Okay, sometimes they came on their gap year to Israel, found God, whatever it might be, and then all of a sudden everything is, wild and crazy. I had one time, I was standing on the stairs. My parents, my mom, she should live and be well. My father, Shalom, were sitting on the porch in front of our house, the house I didn't grow up in, but the next house. And I was standing, it was Shabbat, and I'm standing on the top of the porch with them, and a neighbor who was newly religious came to talk to my parents. And I guess it was a husband and wife, and the wife was standing, I guess she had something in her pocket by accident. She had some in her pocket, and the Eruv was up, but they didn't hold from the Eruv. and she's about to take a step. He says, "Don't take another step. You'll be chayiv misa. You're gonna be die." Like, okay, chill, dude. Okay, just take a chill pill. It doesn't work that way. Thank God it doesn't work that way. Okay. We all know people who flip out, they go to one extreme. There's nothing wrong with wanting to better yourself. There's nothing wrong to be more religious, more to be more close to Hashem. That's all good. But you have to do with seichel. That's pretty much what the rest of this chapter is about. It's using your seichel, using your intellect and your common sense, which is not common, is to understand what it means to do pre-shoot. And Bezrat Hashem, next week we'll get a little bit more into those two types. Have a wonderful day. And for those who can, like I say, I hope to see you this evening, 7:30 by Annette Puri. Be there. I like how they